Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of February 6th. We have a couple more sections of the budget to go over. Two of them are rather extensive with police and fire, so let's jump right in. Jim?
Okay, so if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to cover culture and recreation first, and then health and human services, and then dig into public safety.
Okay. And we're going to skip over the DPW-related items?
Yes, I believe Parks is in the
yeah.
recreation section. We'll address that
With DPW.
on next Thursday night, a week from tonight. Okay, so health and human services. Page 27, if you go off the abbreviated one.
Section 9. Starting with 9.
Okay.
All set?
Run through them and...
Yeah, so first item in this section is the Board of Health. We'll just handle it the way we handled it a couple nights ago, if you don't mind. Total Board of Health recommended $322,581.
Hold.
Okay, hold. Next item, Council on Aging. Total in that section recommended $336,637.
Hold.
Mark. Okay. Total Veteran Services, $152,418, and it is just those three budgets in that section. So going back, was a hold on Board of Health?
No, go ahead, start.
Yep.
Actually, I'm more or less just curious how it came in, because
49.
I think this is the first time I've seen you give a department more money than it asked for.
Sure. If I'd like to kind of give a little bit of an overview, if you're
Sure.
okay with that. First of all, I'd like to introduce Melissa. Melissa is the new Board of Health Director. She was the deputy agent for 6 years. Robin, she was able to work under Robin, and it was a seamless transition when she took over here. So why did I bump one section up there? That section I bumped up was for the public health nurse. That public health nurse position is something that's relatively new within the last 3 or 4 years. Initially, we partnered with the Walpole VNA, first couple years with that. And then we were fortunate enough to find a local person who was able to help us out. Worked at Walpole Pediatrics and transitioned over to the Board of Health side. Why am I bumping that up a little bit there? It's mostly to work with the Council on Aging to advance some of the programs they have there. Melissa, would you like to touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Do I come up? So, like Jim explained, so originally we did have a contract with the VNA, and I know Robin really pushed for an in-house nurse many, many years, and it was never approved. It finally was approved with a contract where it would be half the hour, so 19 hours with the town, and then 19 with the VNA, and then what was happening is the services were kind of getting misconstrued where we were kind of lacking services, and they had 2 supervisors, so they reported to Robin, obviously, and then reported to the Visiting Nurses Association. So as of July 1, we were able to get a nurse in-house for 19 hours. So right now she does communicable disease reporting. She works with our emergency preparedness, MRC. So the big undertaking that she's looking to do that our office would like to do is the flu clinic. So as of now, we've always relied on Rite Aid and Walgreens and things like that for our 19 and older individuals. 18 and younger, we do get state supply. Something like this, if our public health nurse is able to do so, she would do all the funding for it, she would do all the billing for it. It would open up doors to be able to vaccinate more individuals. It would open up, obviously we get bottlenecks sometimes, so we only are allowed 1 pharmacist from Rite Aid, things like that. Immunizations with the schools. If you have a child coming in right now, it's very hard to obtain immunizations. If we have someone on staff, they would be able to do something like that. And then like Jim mentioned, just having the collaboration with the COA, working with blood pressure clinics, regular routine check-ins, memory cafes, things along that nature. I think it will open a lot more doors.
Okay, thanks.
All right, my question was on the training and development. You just explained the 2 new employees. The expense that is there, and it's not like it's overwhelming, But is this going to be an annual training every budget, or is it just for this one time for them to get the whatever certifications they need?
So what it is it would probably be pretty standard. So obviously, we all have credentials in our office, so CEUs are required. So taking Trish on, she obviously has her nursing license, so we would require that. And then the deputy health agent that took over from my position, our hope is that she gets her soil evaluator this fiscal year. So next fiscal year, she would require, CEUs to uphold her credential.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I release my hold.
Any other questions? Kathleen?
Just a quick one, the drop in professional services agency is because you've just shifted that onto a staff member, right? Am I right?
That's that big chunk that I cut that you said was an option from 24 to
Yeah, for the
9,000.
mine. So it's for, so what it was is, we received a grant last year for interface referrals. So what it was is, we received the grant, and in order to continue this service, it would be $15,000 for the year. So it was something that we did put in originally to see if we could have.
And what we saw in that one, and the reason I cut it, is underwhelming. It was underwhelmingly used. It really, no one was really using it.
So it's interface referral services. So what it was is, anyone calling with a mental health issue, needing support or resources, would call this line, and they would be able to, within 2 weeks, provide them, based off their insurances and things along that nature, resources directly that pertains to that individual.
Do you recall how many people used that within?
So
the
we
last
had, with the last year, so November to November, there were 107 individuals who utilized this service.
So I looked at it like, okay, down to 25,000. Yeah, so basic math. I said to Melissa, what could go out of this? And she said, it is being underused, so that's why I eliminated it.
But there's some other way to get those services for people, right?
So I'm gonna see if we can get a grant, maybe not the same grant, but a similar grant, because the thing is, we do collaborate this service. So the reason, I was under the health department, but the whole thing is the COA, the police, the schools predominantly use it. So it would be nice to have the service provided to individuals. So potentially working on grants to get the money to do so, again.
Any other comments? Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
good job.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Council on Aging.
So with the Council on Aging, I'd just like to kind of hear an overview of what's going on. So I'm seeing big increases from the salary and part-time costs, and then the cost growth in pretty much, well, quite a few of the expense items.
Sure. Just to start off, I kind of touched upon this a bit in the budget message. One number that comes off the top of my mind is about 2 years ago, we went from 816 users a year, does that sound about right, to over 2,100 as of per year as of the writing of the budget message back in January. That's the one that really jumped out to me. I know Carrie can drive home some of the figures. Carrie's our director of the Council on Aging. But I think the usage has really gone up in that building. It's amazing every time you go over there. It's completely filled. And I never thought people would be parking across the street. The front parking lot's full, and a lot of the time, Josette can attest to this back parking lot. The front parking lot across from the police station is also filled. So the usage, we built it, and they definitely came, for sure. So
Are they all Walpole residents? Are fees charged?
Don't touch upon it.
They are not. There is a document coming around, and one of the stats that we track is in-town versus out-of-town residents. We do open the doors to any senior in the state, all the COAs do, so that people can get what they need wherever they can find it. You'll see that we maintained about a 75-25% in town versus out of town. So we did get a lot of new members, but most of those new members that were coming in were from Walpole. Some people from out of town, but we kind of maintained that 75-25.
So the COAs statewide, any you can go to?
Anyone you want. We have people who have the whole collection on their keychain.
One of the funny things is a lot of our seniors used to go out to Medfield and some of the surrounding towns.
They did. A lot of them went other places.
We've gotten them back, plus their friends they made in those other towns, so.
Right. They did support a lot of the needs of our seniors for many, many years. And so it was nice to be able to welcome them back. And then it's a nice thank you in a way. Come and play pool here or enjoy this program that they don't have in Norwood or other places.
Do you find other towns not putting money into COA because the other towns are subsidizing it for them?
I think just this week, we had a tour of, was it?
Long Meadow
Long
is
Meadow.
coming next
We've had
week.
multiple council on aging.
Millis came, Millis has a study going on, so they were here last week too.
So a lot of them are in the process of building. I know Medfield isn't that old. We used to, our seniors used to use theirs, so it's just a matter of syncing up the budgets, I think, in these other towns, just as we were able to do.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed, comparing the budget to last year, is we did increase hours of the van drivers by about 10 hours a week in this budget. And also for the clerical support, there was an increase in the hours there too, which kind of drives that budget increase. Other questions?
That's it.
Thank you.
And no-
Actually, I'm just, while we're here, what are the main services that are being used?
What are the main services that are being used?
Yeah, with all these
Meaning
people that are coming, is your
actual professional
one or two things-
services?
No, like, is it fitness that's bringing
Yes.
people there? Is
Yes.
it networking? What's the main drivers?
So I think the charts will help you to see. I think fitness, we just had a kind of planning meeting with the team to set some goals for the next year and beyond. And we feel like we have maxed our fitness for right now. We offer something all the way from sitting only to, very active Zumba and a new dance yoga program. We have tap dance. We know that seniors do well and do better and live longer, independent lives when they're fit and active. And we offer them so many fitness opportunities. I think it's maybe the thing that they participate in the most because it's easy to join. There's something for everyone related to that, whether they're sitting or really, really active. We have a lot of people who come to play games. That's new. We've had a great Learn to Play program that's Learn to Play that goes to beginner. So if someone wants to play a game, they don't know how. They meet new people, and there's large groups that have formed just around recreational things like Mahjong or Rummy Cube, and it's a real community builder, which is a little bit of a surprise that we thought we would be doing other things, but games have been very popular, and it's helped to build the welcome kind of thing that we've been working on all year that I think has made us so successful. People can come, meet new people, feel welcome to come join that game and learn, and then they have lunch together, then they go to fitness together, then they're meeting outside of here. So it's been a
I just have
building
one more
point.
question. So I'm curious with, when they come,
Yes.
like how many bring themselves and then how many come in the van or other?
The majority of our users drive themselves, but we do have a large group of people who have no other way of getting to us or some even to the store to go shopping every week without us. Those are our most vulnerable people out in the community. We provide that service to anyone who asks for it. They have to be independent with a caregiver if needed, so that we're taking people who are independent, who can be there on their own.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I just had one other thing, because you don't always toot your own horn. One thing that I've noticed is the collaboration between New Pond and the senior center, running trips together and
We
whatever.
couldn't do
I think
it without
it's- I think
them.
It's great for everybody.
I don't think they could do it without us,
I
and we
think I
can't
brought
do it
that up
without
last year
them.
when you were here.
Yeah.
Not that you weren't doing it, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a nice partnership and opened up a lot of opportunities for
Right.
them. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you want us to do votes on sections for some of these where you don't anticipate changes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So the items covered in
Health and Human
Health and Human
Services.
Services, I'm fine with that.
Anybody want to make a motion on the total Health and Human Services for $118,636?
So moved.
So moved by Susan, seconded by Denny?
800?
Yeah, $811,636.
For the whole Susan Denny.
Yeah, Susan Denny. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain?
Abstain.
1301.
Thank you. No, 1201.
1001?
And so,
11.
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Did the math right.
Okay. Moving on to,
Recreation?
yep, culture and recreation. First item here is Walpole Public Library, total $886,725. Recreation Department,
Sorry, can I put a hold on the library?
Yep. Andrew and Kathleen.
okay. Recreation Department, what's the total there? $243,908.
Skip over parks.
Parks, we'll get back to the night of DPW. Historical Commission, $315. Town Celebrations, $2,000. And Trail Committee, $1,750.
Hold.
Is that Andrew or Denny?
Yep. Walpole Public Library, Andrew, that was you?
Yeah, I saw very pleasantly in the budget the addition of a children's programmer for 16 hours a week. And I guess my question is, first of all, I fully support this. This is fantastic. The programming, is that set by the library board of trustees? And then will this children's programmer implement those programs that come down through you, Sal, and through the trustees? Or is it through the Friends? I'm just wondering how that works.
In the way we envision this position, is that basically the person will be in charge of the programming. So our hope is to get someone who's going to develop that programming. Obviously, there'll be input from community members, there'll be input from other staff, from supervisors, and so on and so forth. But we're looking for someone to come in and sort of say, hey, here's a bunch of stuff we can do, and then do it. That's our plan.
They will create and run.
Correct. That'll be their primary focus.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I also agree that a children's program is needed. Can you give the committee an update on how this came to? Because I think a lot of this was a push from grassroots efforts of parents to kind of help revamp the children's room.
Yeah, we
Go to the board of directors and go to the library and create a separate kind of friends group.
Yeah, we do have a parents advisory group that has been very active. They meet monthly in the library. I try to attend their meetings as much as possible, sometimes even if it's just for a short time, to have that communication and feedback. There was a need identified for more programs. We have actually, I was pleasantly surprised, our statistics for last year were up. We had like 150 children's programs, which was about a 50% increase from the year before. So we had made some progress internally, but we really wanted to have someone who kind of would have that as their main focus. We were able to do this because we had someone retired, and then someone else resigned. So when we replaced those people with, it opened up a part of the budget. That's why our budget didn't increase significantly, even though we're adding this position. The timing kind of aligned with need and the availability to do it within our budget constraints.
Kathleen?
So mine was about the children's program too. What age is this?
Well, this will be preteen kind of. We're
So
looking
who does
from
teen
to.
programming?
That's a good question. Kara is the one who does our teen programming, yes. That will be our next focus after this person.
So this is preteen and down.
Yeah, we're looking middle school down, anything that will go through the children's department.
I'm curious about the books and periodicals.
Uh-huh.
How do you guys determine what gets bought? Are there specific expenditures per group? Do you look through your inventory and decide that the adults need more than the young adults?
That's a good question, and it's part statistical analysis, part art. Basically, what you're looking for is you're looking at what you've got and how it's being used to help focus sort of where you need to look at in the upcoming year. So for example, a lot of streaming services, ebooks, and all that kind of stuff, that has become increasingly a bigger part of our circulation. So obviously we continue to feed that because that's sort of where we can identify a need. Other things like magazines, about every other month one goes out of business, so that sort of is taking care of itself. It doesn't need much input from me, but you're just looking at trends. I know that both Kara and Norma Jean, who do most of the bulk of the buying for the library, go through all the professional periodicals, look through all the reviews. So what you're really looking for, the art part of it, is you're trying to get a mixture of items that's going to appeal to the broadest cross-section of people. Obviously, no library can buy everything, but you're buying cookbooks and knitting books and woodworking, and you've got to buy some computer books and fiction, and you've got to kind of figure it all out as you go along. So it's a work in progress.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Can I just, sorry, I could spend all day in the library and all day talking about the library. And I think I brought this up with you before, but that you see the trend of the library of things. I know we don't have a lot of room,
Right.
but are we headed in that direction?
We've been looking into it, and we've had a lot of discussions. Our main focus for last year was sort of looking at the children's programming, and what we're looking at is we sort of identified some space, and it's a matter of just us kind of like getting past this, getting established, and then kind of making it a focus for a prior year. But yeah, we've had discussions at the trustee level a couple times about the kinds of things we can do. We were thinking of starting in the children's room, sort of to augment the programming by adding other supplementary items like kits and games and things. And the idea for us is to kind of make as much as we can in the room, like just stick a barcode on it.
Mhm.
So if we're buying a puzzle, it's not just a puzzle to use here, but if we can stick and then it can go out if someone wants to use it. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at, and we have been identifying space
Great.
for that kind of stuff.
So for those of you who haven't been to like Medfield Library, you can get a gold panning kit.
Yes.
You can get an Elmo cake pan. You can get an Instapot. There's a whole array of things that you want to try out an Instapot. Come and take it here first, try it out, bring it back. And it's really pretty cool, I think, because who needs an Elmo cake pan in their basement? But you may need it once, So,
Thank you.
I think so.
Is that it? All right, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
well,
Last item I believe you had a hold on was
Trails Committee.
Trails Committee at 1750. Andrew?
Yeah, I had a question about the note here, which said, this is increased from the prior year as it has come to our attention that volunteers have been using their own money to purchase supplies and not seeking reimbursement from the town. I'm just wondering what supplies the Trail Committee had been purchasing with their own money and now need.
I was surprised to learn one day, walking with Gary Riggett, I was with him and Mark Gallivan, and we were talking about a potential rail trail connecting the back of the police station to the housing authority, and the logistics involved in that. We kind of got off track one day and started talking about the pamphlets that they distribute and everything, and Gary mentioned, I said, you can afford all that within your budget? Isn't it only a couple $100s? And he said, no, I pay for a lot of it out of my own pocket. And I said, well, how much do you think? And really, the number, I said, what realistically do you think you need? He said, if I had $2,000, that would really help us a lot. Our members raise the rest of the money, and it's the pamphlets and the work that goes into there, and some of the rakes. They go out and buy their own rakes and, brush cutters and everything. And this is one of those types of budgets where, like the Ponds Committee years ago, when those guys came out of the woodwork and, brought back Turner's Pond and the Memorial Pond, and Clark's Pond and everything else, they were just doing it out of their own funds, and I was just hoping to find a way to help those folks out there.
Well, I think it's fantastic. I say it because I think the trails are just a great treasure in Walpole. Everything from the town forest to the connections to the Bay Circuit Trail, the Mine Brook towards Bedfield, or down, through the town forest towards Sharon and across Washington. My one question, because I just don't know where this comes in the budget, maybe it's not the Trails Committee, is who who funds and who puts up the staff to make the trail markers?
Glenn Maffey would probably be the best person to answer that.
Yeah, okay.
Glenn and Gary, and I could ask those folks to come in and talk to you a little
No.
bit about it.
I mean, it's not going to affect this budget. I just was curious.
I know when the Jarvis Farm Trail was done, and back there that connects over to, what's that, over near Pine Street, I think it is, or that one was done with all their time and services and everything. It was built on their own. Joe Grant walked me through there, so yeah. So I think they do it most of it on their own. So.
Great.
I wish they were here. I wanted to commend that group because
Yeah.
I did the New Year's Day walk, and there were tons of people there. It was astonishing. And what they've done on their own, time, money, and effort, is really just phenomenal. We really owe them a debt of gratitude. So I'm in favor of this small increase for them, and hope that they'll continue to be as dedicated as they've been.
Okay, next time I'll definitely have them in. Yeah.
Release.
Other questions? Where we didn't talk about the Parks Division, we'll
We can hold, yeah.
vote that group, the
Yeah.
entire group next week.
Okay. Jumping,
Yeah.
Right.
so jumping back to
Parks.
public safety,
Section 5 for public safety.
I assume there's gonna be a hold on police and fire.
Yes.
Good assumption, okay. So we'll just, Chairman, I'll say you have that hold. Okay. So police and fire hold. Inspectional services, total 486, 945. Waits, Mark?
Yeah, I just have a general question. Inspectional services, with what they're inspecting, is it federal mandates, is it state? Does the town have its own unique mandates that it requires to be
I'll
inspected?
hand that over to Building Commissioner Mike Yanovich.
So we inspect based on the Massachusetts State Building Code, as well as local zoning regulations. So we are inspecting anything from the single-family dwelling to the buildings downtown, as well as we do a lot of inspections in cooperation with the Walpole Fire Department for restaurants or liquor license establishments, multifamily dwellings, anything that requires an inspection every year, or some dwellings require inspections every 5 years. So most of it is state code, but on the regulation side or the zoning side, that's local regulation.
What are the total fees that we earn for all these inspection services?
I think
Do I have that?
last fiscal year was 1.8.
Yeah, that sounds
I
about
think it was
right.
1.8 million last fiscal year.
Let me look it up real quick.
I'm sorry, you said 1.8 million?
Correct.
And that includes not only them, but the fees that the planning board may collect, zoning board, as part of their filing fees and everything.
That includes building permits and everything else, right?
That
Yeah.
doesn't-
1.8, yeah.
that wouldn't include.
Okay, Jim, I'm
Oh, wouldn't
set.
complain anymore? Okay. Oh, you're set? Okay, I was looking it up. Mike is right, it's 1,778,000. Year before was 1,834,000. Okay, weights and measures. Emergency management. Animal control. And
Hold on animal control.
CO, okay. Okay. Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to do the easiest budget first, if you want to.
Well, actually, yeah, right. My hold is basically, how is the working relationship going on with the police chief being the direct line of contact for animal control now?
Let the chief answer that. I'd like to introduce the police deputy, Richard Kelleher, too. He's our new deputy chief. So I'll let you answer the ACO office.
was shuffling my chair around, so I missed the question.
How's the relationship with the
The working
ACO?
relationship with the police chief being in charge of animal control now?
It's going well. John, I think John in the beginning, he was a little hesitant about moving in there, but I think he's happy in his new office and new phone and new ability to communicate with us and everything. So it's gone well. There hasn't been really any hiccups.
That's basically it. Just wanted to get that update. Thank you.
Okay, so skipping back to police budget, if that's okay? So, just to touch upon, and the chief can fill in, obviously, there, as I mentioned in the budget message, there's an increase here of, the three biggest items is 2 new patrol officers and the new position of lieutenant, which would bring the total lieutenants in the police department from 2 to 3. John made a really great case for why that's needed. I'm sure he'll touch upon that tonight. This will bring the total officers, number of sworn officers in Walpole up from 44 to 47. I also added an extra crossing guard in there. John had asked for, I think, 3 or 4 extra ones. I was able to fund one. They're small. It's about $5,400 a year, but I felt it was important given some of the traffic concerns that we've seen around town. Like to continue to do that. And so, you want to touch upon the new positions at all before?
Sure, thank you. So last year, or leading up to this year, we started to look at a strategic plan looking into the future of the Walpole Police Department. With the anticipated growth and that we're seeing here in Walpole, we started to look at some of what the priorities are going to be to move the department along with the growth that's taken place in town. And the big issues that we're going to have to focus on is increasing police personnel, first of all, our patrol force. You know, it's only really been over the past few years that the town, and with the help of Jim and the Finance Committee town meeting, that we've increased the department from 40 officers to 44. That also happened to be the same size of the department, 40 officers, when I came here 23 years ago, and when Chief Stillman came here before me. And so the department was very stagnant for a long time, and as the town grew, we didn't grow. And now the town is growing, and we're also dealing with much different types of police calls. The traditional role of policing has changed. It's changed from dealing with a lot of mental health issues, substance use disorder issues, and domestic violence. Those the calls we've always kind of dealt with. But our role has changed. You know, in the past, when the plan was kind of deal with mental health and substance abuse with arrest, right? And it was a criminal justice system issue. We've now transformed that into providing more resources and trying to get to the crux of the problem, the underlying issues, and helping people get help. So our role has changed. And as the town increases, we have to increase the amount of police officers that are out there. The next issue is our command staff. And while I've heard some people in the community mention that we are top-heavy, we're far from being top-heavy. We have a police chief, a deputy chief, and 2 lieutenants that are our command staff. And we've done comparisons to other area departments, and we're actually on the lower end of command staff size across our area. And so what we want to do is we have 3 main components of the department. We have patrol, administration, and investigations. And some of the investigations is also / community services. So our school resource officers fall under there. Rebel is also assigned over there. And so the way that our department is, you know, we're rank and structure, right? The organizational chart is hierarchical, right? It's this command and control, and each person throughout our chain of command reports to one person, and that one person may be with their span of control can only supervise, you know, 5 to 7 people at one time. So that's how the department is structured. And the way we are right now, you have the chief, the deputy chief falls under me, and then there are 2 lieutenants, and the investigations and community services, as well as administration, a lot of our administration is overseen by a sergeant. And what happens when we do that is we take that sergeant away from the patrol duties, and we have to assign them to do these other duties. And we've run into a problem where you talk about command and control, where that sergeant is now going to issue directives to other sergeants at the same rank, many times even with less tenure. And that's really not how we operate. So what we want to do is is take that, that kind of gap and make that a lieutenant, so that we have the chief, the deputy chief, and then there's 3 lieutenants, and those 3 lieutenants are responsible for the 3 main components of the department, who report to the deputy chief, and then obviously I oversee the department as a whole. The other issue is, I brought this up, I think I mentioned it last year, increasing of minimum manning. You might not want to hear this, but the Walpole Police Department, our minimum manning is 3 police officers and 1 sergeant on the shift, to cover 20 square miles, 25,000 people, over 21,000 calls for incidents every year, 4,000 911 calls, and I could go on and on. 300 mental health calls last year, 31 overdoses, 6 fatalities. We are a very busy police department, and we're running into an issue where 1 sergeant and 3 police officers to cover that distance is insufficient. And so we need to work towards increasing the staffing, so that at some point in the future, I can start to increase the minimum manning that are on the shift. And then, as Jim mentioned, the crossing guards, I get a lot of complaints about that. There's, our most precious people in the community, our kids, are walking to schools, and in some places there's no sidewalks, or crosswalks aren't designed very well, and it becomes a public safety issue. And there's a few areas that I would like to increase crossing guards. In front of Old Post Road is one area, Old Post Road School. I would actually like to have one at High Plain and East Street, High Plain and Wash, I mean. And Elm Street and East Street also become a problem. That's problematic as well. We did get one, so I think we'll probably look at the priority and where we're going to put that crossing guard. And then some of the other issues, eliminating the officer in charge. When I mentioned that lieutenant, what I do is I'll put that lieutenant in to oversee detectives, community services, and then that administrative side, I'm going to move them back into patrol. And at some point in the future, I want to eliminate what's called the officer in charge. And officer in charge is that when there is a patrol shift supervisor on, who is a sergeant, the rank of a sergeant, when they can't fill that shift, the supervisor's shift, it's filled with a patrol officer. And we've run into situations where we have a police officer who maybe have 2 years on the job, and they're in charge of a shift. And it might be a Saturday night. And if you look at the police department, right, we're probably the highest liability department in the town. We can use force, and there's civil rights, and there's arrests, and there's all kinds of things that come into play with what we do. And it's important, I think, that we have the right supervision out there, and eliminate that officer in charge position in the future. Make sure that we have sergeants on 24 hours a day. And achieving accreditation and certification standards is a goal of mine, as well as everybody else in the department. And that's something that we're also going to continue to work on. So that kind of that runs it down. Biggest issue, though, is that the lieutenant and the 3 officers to get us up to 47 officers total. That brings us up, I've talked about the ratio of officers in town, where that brings us up to about 1.74 officers. Historically, Bureau of Justice statistics, 2 police officers per 1,000 is a good target range, which would put us at 50 officers right now with 25,000 people. So we would like to at least maintain that 1.74 officers or higher, and that's prior to the anticipated growth. So once the growth starts happening, Walpole really needs to stay ahead of that. And it's important also to remember that it can take, by the time, if we hire a police officer today, that police officer will not be actively answering calls on their own for a year, up to a year and a half from now. The police academy is 6 months long. They do 12 weeks of field training after that. And then we start to integrate them into answering their own calls and being out by themselves.
Yeah, question on the, the minimum manning, what's a normal shift consist of? Not what's your minimum, but
It can range, so it can range. There's nights that we can, on a 4 to 12 shift, there's nights that we might have seven officers and a sergeant on, which is great. And there are nights when they're all busy, and we have enough going on that they're pretty much consumed on the shift. But depending on, if officers are injured, if there's vacation time in the summertime, obviously we run into issues.
But you try to schedule 7.
We try to schedule our minimum. We split the each shift 12 to 8, 8 to 4, 4 to 12 into squads. So there's a certain number of officers. There's usually about 5 to 6 officers assigned to each squad, right? Because we're 24 hours a day. They work 4 days on, 2 days off, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So we try and maintain about 6 or 7 officers per shift. But maybe there may only be some of them have only 3 officers on a squad, 3 and 4.
Thank you.
And last year you gave us actually the staffing breakdown when we had one of our meetings.
Right.
And the organization chart, and it's like, trying to cross-reference that information was rather daunting. But there are also what they see as peak service hours, which I guess is generally the 4 to midnight shift is the peak.
Yep.
Because that's where most people are on the road or they're all home. So staffing shifts based on what they think is peak demand.
During, do you track the most activities? I know from my old life, we used to worry about emergency rooms, and Tuesday nights, for some reason, were.
Yep.
Yeah.
We do. We do try and track that. We don't put a lot of faith in it because in Walpole we can have a very crazy, busy Tuesday night and a quiet Saturday night. You just never know. But we do try and plug in staffing for particular times to reflect, how busy we can get.
Thank you.
Andrew?
I have a lot of questions. I want to start with the patrol investigations. The new patrolman and the new lieutenant. Is it 3 or 4 officers we're adding? Because
3 total.
3.
One of them is a lieutenant.
okay, so
So-
I see when I look at the budget, I was just trying to understand this. I see the new lieutenant position, and this is under page 70 in the munis forms. But then on page 76, it says 3 new hires under sergeants and patrolmen.
So the way I look at that, so I got a little creative with the lieutenant. I'm technically not starting the lieutenant. I think I did it on like 10-1. And the way I look at it is, okay, if I can phase this person in, it's going to be an in-house promotion. I know, it's likely it's gonna be one of the sergeants one of the sergeants is already doing a lot of the duties. I looked at John and I said, can you have him do this a little bit longer until we phase that up? Because that's going to result in that sergeant going up to a lieutenant, and we're going to have to hire 3 new people as a result of that. You follow? 3 new people off this.
Yeah.
So the academy too, importantly, the police academies run, they're 6 months long, so the academy typically won't start, the budget will start July 1st, but the police academy doesn't usually start till October, mid-October, maybe even like November 1st, around that time frame. So we wouldn't make that, you wouldn't really make that promotion until, we hire the 3 officers, and then we'll make the promotion
So
kind
the
of
3 officers will start as of, I see. So one of the officers starts as of January 1, the other 2 are July 1.
Yeah.
I phased it in.
You phased it in,
budget
yeah.
purposes.
Yeah.
A quick question. We don't actually start paying the person until they complete the academy?
No, you pay them in the academy.
Okay,
Yep.
so the day they go to the academy, they start on our payroll?
Yep, that's right.
So we approve your budget, you can go out in May or June, say, here's the job opening, you find somebody, he says, okay, you're heading to the academy October 1st, he's on your payroll.
Right.
You don't have to wait till 3 weeks before the academy to find the person.
No, we would do that, we do that in advance, yeah.
I have another personnel question. It's about overtime and just the trends in overtime, particularly for sergeants and patrol officers. To take a step back, I totally agree about staffing up the department to meet the was it 2 per 1,000 residents?
Yeah.
2 per, yeah,
2 per
right.
1,000?
Yeah.
And so that would be 50 or so, but that's before the new growth. So I fully support the addition of the 3 new officers. But I'm just wondering, what should our expectation be for the decline in overtime given the staffing up? Because I fully support the increase in staff, but I would just, frankly, not to be critical, I'd like to see the overtime decline faster. And I see how it declined really rapidly between fiscal year 2018 and 2019, and then it's kind of level funded this current fiscal year, and then down slightly, just 15,000.
My reasoning behind funding that down slightly versus what the chief had asked for, because you see, 20 were budgeted at 500,000. He requested 500,000. I recommended 485. My reasoning behind that, when we sat down and ironed this whole thing out, I looked at him. I said, I know you want these 3 new positions. My expectation is if we hire these 3 new positions, will help. It'll impact the overtime budget. I don't know what that impact will be, but $15,000 or a $500,000 budget to me was minimal. I mean,
Yeah, that's right. So the other thing is when you look at those trends too, like I wish I could predict what's going to happen this year for the rest of the year, but if you remember, I think it was 2 years ago, we were all like, oh, you guys spent a lot of overtime. That year, like, we had 4 officers that had significant injuries, like that were injured on duty, that were out for a period of time. And so when those things happen, it's like, okay, well, 2 of them are from one shift, so that ends up being, you got to fill a shift, and there's overtime there. This year so far, we've been pretty lucky, knock on wood, that everybody's been pretty healthy. But I don't. Tomorrow night or the next week, I don't know where we'll be for that. And also, I wish I could say that adding a few more officers is definitely going to save us overtime. But in the future, I just want us all remember that we want to look at increasing that minimum manning too, and making sure that we have like at least 4 officers and a sergeant on the shift, and as opposed to the 3.
Ally got a question.
I was just gonna say, I completely agree with the new hires. I think it's a good step. How quickly we're going, and I don't think the realization of how long it takes officers to actually be on the street and actively be a part of each shift. Hopefully we can just keep this trend going. And I fully support too the crossing guards, as someone who travels the OPR crossing guard and witnessed a car cutting through a group of kids in the crosswalk this year. I often walk across the street and I tail the end of the line with the crossing guard to get them all across.
Yeah, and if you see her now, she runs back. There's 2 crossings, so she's running. She's kind of like going back and forth, and then you have Emerson that's coming out. So she's, you get traffic coming out of there.
I tail the end of the line, and I'm like, come on, guys, we're moving.
That's most likely where we're going to put this next crossing guard.
It's a tricky job.
And unfortunately, the people who get off the train between 5 and 6 at night need a crossing guard to cross the street. They just jump out in front of you and it's dark and you hardly see half of them.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just looking forward, we're just gonna have to keep with this trend to at least kind of move this along with the growth that we have to keep that.
Did you have another quick
Yeah,
comment?
just on the overtime, if I have listened correctly on cutting it back, these new hires, you're not going to see the impact of them really until fiscal year 22, right? Because the
Right.
time,
Well,
6
we
months, they
have-
go in October, they come out in March, you got them for a couple of months.
The good thing is we have 3 officers in the academy right now. So those officers are going to come out, they could, let's just say one's on midnights, one's on 4 to 12, one's on days. That just increased our squad, right, by one person. So that's gonna help out. But yeah, it'll be a while to those next 3
And I would say,
officers.
Jim, just for planning for the following year, I wouldn't really change it.
I'm not gonna.
Expect
It's
a
just,
decline.
it was a matter of fitting everything in like a kind of pieces of the puzzle. I knew how important it was because I sat down with the chief before. I said, "You got all these requests. I can't fund everything. What's your priorities?" And he said, "Lieutenant, the officers, the crossing guards, the IT person." So first thing to go was the IT, and I looked at him and I said, "Can we make do with?" He advocates. Last year he advocated for IT. Eventually we're going to have to fill the IT person, but I just took it on the face that. And so I looked at it and I said, "Okay, I was every nickel and dime I was picking at." So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm
And
just
if it
thinking
dips, I'll be
for
back here asking for more.
Next year's budget, I
Yeah.
wouldn't decline too much, and if you end up with excess, then you can worry about it in 23.
Yeah.
And actually, it was nice to see that all the dispatcher positions are filled at this time, and we
Yeah,
don't
I
have to
know.
worry about trying to fill vacancies. Last year, we knew 2 people were leaving the dispatching corps, and we hadn't even gotten to 10 yet, and the budget was like, new hire, new hire, new hire. And then they had overtime, because we had to have overtime to cover the training cycles. And it's like, yeah.
We gotta stop doing such a good job with hiring our
Training people.
dispatchers, because one of them's a police officer, he's in the academy now, and
Yeah.
one's at the top of our list who we really want to be in there too.
Real quick on staffing.
Those guys are looking.
With some of the turnover over the last couple of years, are you in a position where you don't see retirements on the horizon for the next 2 or 3 budget cycles, or are we gonna be?
Two
No,
or
we
three.
do. We do have a couple that are maxed out and, they're considering retirement. But it still could be it could be another year or 2 before they retire. We're really young, it's a very young department right now. I don't even know some of them.
Haven't been disgruntled enough to raise your eye?
What's the requirement to retire? Is it
To max out, they have to be 55 years old and 32 years service.
Thank you.
I just had a question for clarification. You said you have three in the academy. That's just to get us back to 44, right?
That'll bring us to 44, correct? Yep.
And then one other thing, shout out to Officer Ruhana,
Yes.
hitting the ground running.
He's unbelievable. He's doing
Yeah.
a great job, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Love seeing his name in the paper.
And we got him for free too, by the way. I like to, if Chief Brooks is watching, he self-sponsored himself, and Chief Brooks sponsored him in Norwood. But he didn't have a position for him when he got out of the academy. So we went to the graduation, we scooped him and brought him back.
Look for more of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Mark, then I'm going back to Andrew.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, you talk about the changing police force. Are there duties, activities that the police department's doing now that you don't feel are really the police department should be doing, and it should be going to another group?
No, I mean, I think, just from my own experience and being on as long as I have now, policing has changed throughout my entire career, and it's policing has had to adapt. A couple of years ago, Andrew said I brought this up at the Martin Luther King Day. President Obama created what was called 21st century policing, which completely it's kind of a spin-off of community policing, and just being very well balanced and dealing with the criminal activity, but also engaging the community a certain way, allowing inclusion and a voice and all this different things. It's a philosophy that we've accepted here in Walpole. And so I think that we're just looking to have a well-balanced focus on the criminal side of activity that takes place, but then have that community engagement piece too. And the officers that we're hiring, that we're trying to recruit, have to fall into that philosophy from when they bring them forward. So when you're talking about that shift, like I mentioned, mental health calls, it increased another 100% last year. There's a lot of mental health crisis, and what's really good about it is that we've had people, part of it's getting rid of stigma and everything, but we've actually had people, because they know what we do now, have stepped out on the street and waved, a police car down, and just told them, I need some help. And we'll call the ambulance down and get them over to the hospital or something like that. That never happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but it happens now. So we definitely deal more with social issues now. Like I said, mental health and the substance abuse issues and that kind of thing. And we just deal with it differently. And I think that we just adapt to that. So.
Okay, with the staffing that we're looking at, say we're approving to go to 47, here's the command staff, chief, deputy, 3 lieutenants, and then it would be your goal to continue to increase the numbers, patrol, basically till they get to about 50. Is that right?
To me, I think the chief and I share the same belief here. 25 is what our census is. I think when our census comes out in 21, 22, maybe they'll have some of these projects online by then. I fully expect us to be up to 27, 28,000 people. That's not even counting the project in South Walpole. So I think we should strive to get to the what is it, 2 to every 1,000 ratio. But I'm hoping the economy continues to keep going so we can keep adding. Fair statement?
Yeah, I think that what we're doing right now is a good plan. We're slowly increasing, incrementally the size of the department, so that we're growing with the growth. And
Are there other
like Jim just said, when we get 3,000 more people in town, we have to be ahead of that because as I explained, how long it takes to get the police officer on the street. You got to kind of be ahead of it, not trying to chase that goal.
So the 2 per 1,000, are there other criteria that's looked at? So for instance, I've lived in Walpole now 20 years. I feel no less safe today than the day that I moved in at. So, in talking with people, we're adding to the police force. Why? Well, people see the population increase, but yet, the police force has done a great job. People don't feel any more threatened, so it's, why are we putting the money there? And we have this criteria, 2 officers per 1,000 is kind of an average that towns are looking at, and I'm just wondering, is there other criteria that is used just to kind of be able to justify when I talk to the constituents, no, when you look at Walpole compared to others, here's how we're tied in. It goes with the police and the fire, just the general public safety activities.
Just while the chief looks up that info he's digging, my question came up, a similar question came up when he asked for the lieutenant. I said, I'm going to be asked, we're going to be asked, why do you need an extra, lieutenant on your command staff? He gave me a really good example. He's like, we compare ourselves, it was Danvers, right?
Yeah, it was Danvers.
Danvers' command staff was significant. They're about the same size, 25,000 people, metro, up on the North Shore, but located just outside of Boston. I was really surprised at their command staff compared to our deputy, the chief, and just the 2 lieutenants. Well, how big was their command staff? Do you remember?
They had, there was like 6 members of their command
Yeah,
staff.
that's significantly
Different
bigger,
ranks.
so I know you have some other stats that you look at.
So we do compare a lot of other things. And, the comment that, people feel safe, I guess I'll take that as a compliment, because that, I think lack of crime and lack of fear of crime is a product of good policing, so I have to give the officers of the department some credit on that. But we look at UCR crimes, uniform crime reporting. We look at violent crime. We look at the number of incidents that we respond to, 911 calls. I don't really pay a whole lot of attention anymore to traditional policing of how many arrests did you have, how many tickets did you write, because I don't care about that. How many arrests we made last year has nothing to do with how effective we are, because we went to 300 mental health calls. And if that was 300 mental health calls where we didn't arrest somebody, then I think that's a win for us. If we avoided the criminal justice system, we were able to divert them into getting some help, then that's a win for us. But as far as the crime statistics, we're actually, we've compared ourselves to uniform crime reporting to other areas, and we're pretty high. Last year, we had 308 UCR Part 1 crimes. Part 1 crimes are assault and batteries, any type of violent crime, robbery, break and entering, sexual assaults, that kind of thing. In fact, we had Norwood next door had 335 Part 1 UCR crimes. We had 308. Norwood has 60 police officers. We have 44. We look at incidents. The Walpole Police Department, we had 21,000 plus incidents. When I say incidents, I mean something that we had to respond to that generated a police report. And on top of that, we had 4,000 911 calls. We also can look at violent crime, and last year we had 59. Walpole had 59 violent crimes. I can compare us to Mansfield. Mansfield had 39. Norwood had 42. That, I don't know if that's, and now there can be issues with how they enter that, so.
Does that exclude the prison?
What's that?
Does that exclude the prison?
It does, yeah. No, the prison is not included in our UCR claims, no.
I'm set, thanks.
But, so there's a shift. Does that real quick?
I know the change with society and everything changes, the police methods and stuff of times of old. But you had mentioned the mental health calls that you get. Is there a specific age bracket that you're getting a priority on? Like, is it, with like teenagers or seniors? Can you even put them into categories like that? Or do you just label mental health in general?
Their mental health in general, we, in our strategic plan, we do identify some of the areas in Walpole that we respond to frequently. Home for Little Wanderers is one place as far as youth are involved, but we also have, I think we have about 15 group homes in Walpole. We have mental health facilities in Walpole. We have multiple tech collaboratives, so we have, the BICO school up on Route 1. We have the Tech Phoenix at the Walpole High School. We have Tech Collaborative in East Walpole. We have the Boston League School on Route 1. Different special needs types of schools that those generate a lot of calls. And I'm not saying that that's where that's the problem. I'm just saying that, because we have a lot of these types of facilities, we respond to them every single day. But we could probably break that down as to age brackets and that kind of thing, different demographics. But I can say that it's certainly across all demographics and age groups that we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Hi. I'd be remiss if I didn't raise an issue that is kind of the elephant in the room, the recent departure of Deputy Chief McKinsey, and in particular the alleged incident, the alleged misconduct that precipitated his departure. I don't believe this is the right venue, despite intense public interest, to probe about the details of the incident. And furthermore, I respect your statement about the ongoing investigations. So I'm not going to ask about the incident. However, it would be remiss of me not to, as a budget committee, have budget questions that come to mind given the incident or alleged incident. So I have three, respectfully. So the first is, in terms of training and development in the budget, what's the current process regarding training for officers with respect to sexual harassment and sexual assault? And does this recent incident change any plans regarding that training?
Yeah, great question. So, sexual assault training, sexual, can't think of the word, but in the workplace, it's a Mass General law, and it's also town policy. It's a department policy that we consistently train on that. The Walpole Police Department does have a policy on it. In fact, we have about 100 different policies, but we have one that specifically addresses that. That is routinely trained on, and it is in our, we call it DHQ. That's where we keep all of our policies, and those are constantly updated and reviewed and disseminated openly within the department. So, and we, as part of our the ongoing our evaluations, it's all part of that as well every year.
Yeah, at the end of each evaluation for all town employees, we actually ask the employee and the evaluator to check off, are you aware of any inappropriateness in the workplace? Have you been informed of your rights? And that's just, we started that maybe 7-9 years ago, and it's just a standard form that's in the back where we make sure that each employee acknowledges it. If they acknowledge it, are you aware of where you should report this to? And we list out the agencies and the reporting. When you start here, we also have you acknowledge our sexual harassment policy. So even before all this dating back years, we made sure to make that a priority.
Thank you. My second question with respect to the budget as it relates to this alleged incident is off-duty cars, police vehicles, from past budget cycles, I think I remember, but correct me if I'm wrong, is it just the chief and the deputy chief that have off-duty vehicles?
The chief, the deputy chief, and the detective sergeant. So the detective sergeant responds to calls off, when they're off duty as well. So if there's a sudden death, if there's any type of criminal activity that goes off when they're off duty, they respond right to the scene.
So those two, and then got it. My third and final question is regarding legal bills and settlements. I assume that is segregated from the police department's budget. That's with respect to our legal services, even though I acknowledge that this is a criminal issue and it's independent, as I understand it, of the department. But I'm just wondering whether it's other, incidents that do involve the department. Are those legal bills, do they come through the town's legal budget line item?
Sure. So actually, 2 days ago, I responded to a public records request asking for all of our legal bills dating back 2 years, which I responded to. I checked with counsel first because I'm always leery what could be in those, but I released everything dating up to January, the January 1st, just last month. So it does come through the town's legal budget right there. Legal settlements, I can tell you that we haven't had a payout. The last one I can think of, as far as an employee who might have left, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. As far as here's a lump sum payment or something like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
On that issue of the vehicles, by increasing by hopefully 3 new officers, I noticed in your budget that we've trimmed back replacing vehicles. Are we expecting capital budget in the fall to have to?
You are correct.
Put things on
So,
the agenda?
again, I tried to, Josette, we'll have to answer to her in the fall.
So
but-
as free cash gets reported in August, we determine, can we start getting new vehicles for just the new hires and still possibly have to replace vehicles?
Yeah, so essentially what I did there is, again, I knew how important it was to stay within, to get some new officers in there, but I also was mindful of, here's what I'm increasing the police budget by. So, yeah, you'll see on that last item, machinery and equipment requested was $125,800, recommended is $95,729. My plan is that's essentially almost an entire cruiser, and just make that up through capital. So.
Have we looked at expanding the number of motorcycles in use? I know we're currently at, I think, 3. Are we possibly thinking of establishing a 4th motorcycle, which is easier to get to a lot of incidents because you don't have to fight the rest of the traffic?
Yeah, in the future, I think so, as the department grows. Because one of the, definitely, I can say this unequivocally, that the biggest complaint we get is traffic, right? Speeding and that kind of thing. And I think we've gotten very good at responding to the needs of the community, so that when they have, a speeding problem on their street, that we can deploy the motorcycles out there, and they're very effective once they're posted up. Right now we have 2 officers that are on the motorcycle. They're doing traffic their entire shift, and then we have 3 other officers that are trained and basically share the 3rd motorcycle that we use to deploy to different complaints. So, if it's Pleasant Street and East Walpole, then, either one of those 3, if one of them are on the shift, they'll grab that bike and they'll go out there. But, yeah, in the future, it would be nice to put one more on. Because of the size of our fleet, and we've done comps on fleets compared to the area, and we're about middle-low as far as our total amount of vehicles that we have in the department. And if you recall, last year I did mention that, our police prosecutor, because of the amount of cars that we had, was driving their own vehicle to court. Our school resource officer was driving his own vehicle to school. And, that's, we need to get away from that. I mean, that's, something happens, we talk about liability to the officer who's on official business and driving around their own car. That's not sufficient. So it's something we need to definitely look at, and it is part of our plan going forward that we increase the fleet.
I'm good. Good, okay. Other questions for the chief?
I have one. Just curious, so I walk to the train from School Street when the apartments get filled and come online, I mean, even now, you know, when I walk by at 7, I look down 1A, I look down 27, cars have blocked intersections. Is there a plan with crossing guards in the center of town or something like, I'm just wondering what and the people pull into that, at the bottom of the train path and drop off and pick up and
Yes.
it's chaotic
So
now.
if we're gonna depend on the police to make traffic go away in Walpole,
It's never gonna happen.
it's not, I don't think it's gonna happen.
Double staff.
You know, we just have to remember that, the town is growing and the infrastructure is what it is, right? So there's only so many places you can go. And, you know, in Walpole, we like cul-de-sacs, right? We like building cul-de-sacs off of streets, and it's tough to get from point A to point B. And we know, you know, we just recently got the 2 traffic counters, so we've been placing those strategically throughout the town just to see volume, see how much traffic we have on certain roadways and stuff. And some of it's significant. Lewis Ave comes to mind, where, you know, the traffic on 1A is getting backed up, and what's everyone do? They're gonna bang a right, and they're gonna go up and cut up Lewis Ave, and Lewis Ave one morning had some upwards of like 400 cars or something like that, and which is that it's a residential neighborhood, and so I don't know. I really don't know what how we're going to address that in the future.
Just to piggyback on that a little bit, and I haven't even talked to the chief about this. Part of the transportation bond bill, you know, we received a request over the last 1 or 2 weeks from the state legislators, you know, what's your wish list and everything. And something that we put in just a day or 2 ago was $2.5 million to request, and that was more or less a number that we threw against the wall, because we really don't know what it, but to address the anticipated traffic, the ongoing traffic that's down there. This is something that's on my radar screen when people say, well, Walpole's growing, what do you think about that? It's great, but the biggest thing I'm concerned about with the growing, especially down here and in South Walpole, is traffic, and how can we improve that? We're not going to know what the traffic impact is until it hits us really hard in the face, but I want to be prepared, and eventually we're going to put some money aside to, you know, Holly and, what's that, Wash and Short right there? That's another intersection that the selectmen have asked me to specifically look at, because the chief keeps raising concerns about that intersection. That traffic study, just to study the area, was $20,000. We're going to have to address there. So it's something that you're going to start to see as part of the capital budget. So start putting some money into this, and really, you know, we have to study it, and we have to study it to death before we know what our next step is. We just redid the center 4 years ago, right after I took over, and, you know, it's already maxed out.
Yeah, we were just yesterday, we're down in Taunton at the Mass DOT, and just getting some follow-up on the 1A project, and, you know, that's a significant project there. You know, 4 sets of traffic lights, a new bridge down there on 1A.
That project is going to take 4 years, 3 to 4 years, they said, and that's 3 or 4 years worth of construction from just about Conrad's are right around there, all the way down to the Norwood line. And so we're going to start to see utility work get done September, October of this year, where they're moving the poles back, and then they're going to start construction in the spring of '21. So these are all things we're thinking of. It's going to impact police, DPW, everyone across the board. So.
Okay, thanks.
All yours.
I'm done.
Any other questions for the police chief? Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And while the chief is here, I'd like to entertain a motion on his budget of $6,079,384. By Denny,
Second.
seconded by Susan. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained? 700.
Fire, just while the chief makes his way up here, I just want to touch upon a couple of things. What we have is a little bit of a market question. Usually I don't recommend more than what the department had asked, but a couple weeks ago, before we finalized the budget, the Board of Selectmen had police and fire in and talked to both chiefs about some priorities and some of the things coming up. And the board made it really clear to myself, and the chiefs made it clear to them that he needs more firefighters. Ideally, I think he'd like to be up to 16 across the board. So we're trying, what's recommended here would add 2 new firefighters to the mix, and that would allow the chief to staff to 3 groups of 10 and 1 group of 9. It is my hope, and I hope, would ask that you not vote on the budget tonight for this particular department, to at least get the chief up to 4 groups of 10 across the board to assist there, just to continue to add to the department. And I'm hoping to do that by when the insurance numbers come out and the Tri-County comes out, so I'm optimistic there. So, Chief, anything to add?
Yeah, no, it's, staffing is something that, I don't know where to begin, quite frankly, but the chief hit on a lot of it. Our staffing is a major issue as well. One of the things to keep in mind with us is that we are running 2 departments within 1 department, because the reason I say that is I have the EMS guys, there's 4 personnel dedicated to the ambulances every day, and I have 4 that are dedicated to the fire truck every day. So we are covering the town with 4 people on a fire truck for 21 square miles, 25,152 people. Our call volume since 2014 has increased, this is our emergency call volume, by 26%. We have similar numbers for staffing and where we should be. Our staffing, what I would ultimately like to do, as Jim mentioned, is I feel like we should be at 16 per shift. That would allow us to run 14. We would have 2 basically fills. That would allow us to staff 2 engines, the tower, and both ambulances, and cover the town sufficiently. In the short term, I'd like to get another engine up and running, which would require us to have 13 personnel on each shift and drop to 11. 11, we could cover the town with 2 engines, both ambulances, and provide service better than we are right now. When you call right now, you get us, we show up, but depending on the severity of the call, we have to wait for other people to show up and help us, either from our own callback or from mutual aid. We rely heavily on mutual aid. This past year, we had 14 major incidents, 2 which were second alarms. 2 of them happened to be right out back here, one right behind the station and the other just up the street by Blessed Sacrament. We are a very busy fire department. We have very serious incidents. We do 2,200 transports and about 1,600 fire calls, but the fire calls vary from extrications to the fires that you saw out back. Anything that we can do to increase our staffing would be greatly appreciated.
Questions? Andrew first, thanks.
Just to understand the staffing numbers, I know you talked about in terms of shifts. So the goal in this budget cycle is to get to 10 per shift.
That's correct.
So is that 40? Are there 4
That would put us at
shifts?
40.
That's 40. So you're currently at what, 30?
But our minimum is 8 every day. Just keep that in mind, that our minimum is 8, and there's always, right now, we are usually at 8.
Got it. So you're usually
For fills, for vacation, sick, we have 4 guys out on injury right now, so those are all things that factor into it as well.
So I just wanted to scale this by just total number of firefighters.
Sure.
So roughly, you have like in the high 30s, how many firefighters do you have?
38.
38. And so this would bring you to 40?
Yes.
This budget, if we get it.
Mhm.
So, but typically, you don't really have 38, like you said, sick or vacation, you really have 32, so the 8 per shift.
We always have 8, because that's our minimum, so we that's what the overtime is for. We staff to
Gotcha.
get to 8.
Gotcha.
We have to have at least 8 on.
And then,
And what happens for the other trucks, just so you understand how the other trucks work, if I have the personnel in quarters and they're not at the hospital, they cross-man and they jump over to the fire truck. So we basically are responding to the call. Whatever call comes in is what we're responding to. And then if another simultaneous call comes in, we adjust to try to make it work.
So I should have prefaced this by saying we had a great workshop, I think, last year where we kind of dove deep into the growth of the town and the calls you receive. And so I am fully supportive of the two firefighters. To me, it's a no-brainer to get to 40. I guess the conversation I'm just instigating right now is the bigger picture, the kind of end goal. You mentioned 16 per shift.
Correct.
So would that be 64 firefighters?
Yes.
So to go from 38 now, then to 40, if we had these two, but eventually your end goal is 64.
Correct. Which is what the town of Norwood is staffed at now. They're 10 square miles, their density's a little bit greater than ours, and they're 28,000 people.
And so, gotcha. All right.
And one of the concerns that I have with response is the reconstruction of Route 1A is gonna cause even further delay.
It's a main thoroughfare.
So, yeah, it is, it's the main route for us, for a lot of things. A lot of our calls happen to be down that way, so I'm concerned.
As that construction goes forward, can there be like an automatic, if it's north of something on 1A, just transfer the call to Norwood, because there's no way we can get there on time?
That's not how we operate.
Okay, I was just, you know, because you know the street's gonna be torn up and traffic's going one way.
We're responsible,
Yeah.
we're responsible for our own fire protection in Walpole. We use those communities to help supplement us as they do with us, but to ask them to handle all of our calls is, I don't think is appropriate.
But, you know, is there an option?
We
given
have automatic, we have, I'm sorry, but we have automatic agreements now out on the 109 corridor because of our response time. So Westwood is an automatic response with us out there on that corridor to begin with.
Right, but what about like regionalizing? So we go to the town of Norwood and say, look, during these time period, we're not gonna be able to cover it. Walpole will pay Norwood to cover so much of Walpole's area. Walpole calls Sharon. I mean, is it, and I'm throwing this off the top of my head, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm admitting that up front. But I'm just wondering, you know, is that an option
That's what they would probably
to go ahead and say,
It's not appropriate.
instead of hiring 10 firefighters, pensions, and all these costs, is there a way to minimize our risk and liability? It may not be perfect, but is there a way to do it through some kind of regional cooperation to say, what about Sharon covering this if this part of Walpole is closer to Sharon?
I think it's more of, we have the manpower to respond around town, but as construction interferes with the primary routes, that's where response times can be impeded, and there's a station on the other, across the town line, that's a mile away from the incident, but it's gonna take us 12 minutes to get there because of construction. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm looking at, is like, you know, the closer you get up 1A to Norwood, can they respond faster? Because we know there's no way we're gonna get down one-way traffic of Route 1A, because they're doing Conrad's to Stop and Shop, and there's no way you're gonna get down that one lane of
So
traffic.
what they've committed to, and I just confirmed this with the deputy and the chief, is from 9 AM to 3 PM, there's gonna be at least one lane open of traffic. So that would be a matter of, they're gonna have a lot of officers out there. And during rush hour, it's gonna be 2 lanes open. They're gonna shut down construction altogether. There's going to be night construction there where they're doing other work, but during a lot of these peak hours, there'll be at least one lane to get the ambulances through. And we were really mindful, because not only Walpole uses that, it's every town. Franklin, you know, Rentham, that's the thoroughfare. Yeah, Norfolk, and, so.
Alrighty.
So I did have a question about mutual aid. Where does that show up on our budget? Is there a chargeback for mutual aid, or you just all, everyone?
It's reciprocal.
watches
We
it?
help, they help.
So your idea is great. We'll just farm it out to other people and not get a bill
Well,
back.
They're gonna stop answering the phone.
Yeah,
No,
I don't
and
think
again,
they'd be
I'm just,
Yeah.
I was just trying to think of a concept that says, you know, like,
I
I've read
underst-
about regional fire departments and sharing of things, and is there a better way to do it? Like, if it's easier for us to get to a certain part of Sharon, should we kind of trade off on that response? Versus, no, this is our town, and if it's gonna cost us more, we'll just incur the cost because it's our town.
there are parts of the country where regionalization, that is how they do it. But here in the Northeast, that is not the way it's done. And I don't have the answer for you as to, all the answers as to why, but. All I would say is if you're gonna pay another town to cover our town, I'd rather see you pay me more staff to cover our town and do it with our own people.
Right, but then I would just look at it from a cost standpoint. You
Right.
know, if Norwood's already there, they're gonna charge us a couple grand to cover 2 streets versus now, because you're maxed out, we're now looking at buying a new rig, hiring 4 firefighters, or whatever number, building a building. That's what I was,
But right now, we have the equipment, we just don't have the manpower on shift to move 3 trucks if we had to. You know, other than calling back the entire shift that just went home a couple hours ago and wake them up and bring them back in.
And that doesn't work the way it used to either. And you gotta keep in mind, you know, I mentioned the traffic, but we need the staffing just to service the buildings that we have going in here. This town is blown up, and population-wise, as was mentioned earlier, my modest estimates of where the population is gonna go based on the numbers of the projects that we have currently puts us closer to 28,000 people. And with that and the size of the buildings, we have major buildings on the other end of town. We have Siemens, which is a small city in itself, that we have automatic aid that comes in there on a regular basis with us, in conjunction with us. And we recall our people because it takes us so long and we get committed down there. So the community has changed. And it's not a small town. It is a very large town when you look at the other towns compared to ours around us, in area and traffic and a lot of different facets. NFPA uses a number that I received from them asking them to do some research for me of all the career departments from 2016 to 18, and in the Northeast, they recommend 2.43 firefighters per 1,000, which would put me over 60 firefighters, in the range of what I'm talking. So I have some data to back some of that up. Some of it is also, you know, with regards to the makeup of your community. Our community has a lot of different things in it. We have rail, we have a prison, we have a chemical plant. We have a lot of things in town highways, we're out on Route 95 constantly, so there's a lot of things that take us and are busy. It creates, and it's manpower. You know, unlike our responses are 2 and 3 people responses depending which vehicle they're in. Ambulance being 2, the engine we staff with 3. NFPA suggests that we staff with 4, but we staff with 3. 4 is optimal, 3 is good, 2 is not so good. So we go with 3 on our engine, that's what we have for our staffing. And that's how I base my numbers of what I'm asking you folks to help me with, so.
One other item, I'm sorry to cut you off, the SAFER grant. The selectmen essentially have given Tim the green light to go forward with the SAFER grant, which it used to be 100% match for the first 3 years, and then but the town has to guarantee that they will fund it for the next.
Right, now it's 65, right? 75,
75, 25 is what it is now for the first 3 years, and then we have to guarantee that we'll fund it. But the selectmen would like to see him go forward with that, you know.
Right, so I have asked the Board of Selectmen to have a workshop. I have another presentation similar to the one I did last year for fire prevention. I've put together another presentation to do before them. I didn't think I had enough time to do it tonight, so it'll take a while to do. But I have all the numbers and a lot of the information that I've shared with you this evening to do in a formal presentation. I apologize for it being a little helter-skelter tonight.
Any?
Just some clarification questions. We're at 38 now, is that?
Correct.
We're adding 2 to get to 40.
I also have a fire prevention position that is still open.
It's the day shift.
That'll
Okay, so
be filled
41.
from within. We're working through the collective bargaining process right now on that.
To get to 41, you want to get to 64?
Yes.
So let me ask this question, not to create controversy here, but that's what you want. Jim, what is your plan? and
A little
objective?
bit each year.
No controversy
Just
there.
keep picking, it's.
No, yeah, because time-wise, if we're adding 2 at a time, you're talking, another 20 bodies, 10 more years of doing this, and
Ideally.
people are retiring and
yeah.
going from there in budget numbers. So I'm just trying to figure out, is there an actual plan, or is this just?
No, there's no set plan in place. It's more or less, he
I-
would like that many.
And I have told Jim, I
Yeah.
understand that we can't get there overnight. I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the contract was modified last time around to increase the manning from 7 to 8. So we used to have, I think when I first started, it was probably 7 guys on per shift, and that was really it. We staffed, was that about it?
When you
7?
first came, it was 6.
Yeah, so 6. So we've gone up a significant amount since then. And so each year, we just try to add on what we can. And I try to be fair amongst the 2 public safety departments. And then once I try to sprinkle in, this year I did 1 DPW position in the highway, and just while we're able to add on, just keep doing it a little bit. There's no way I'm going to be able to jump up to 16 anytime soon, because when you add everything together, and I was explaining this to the firefighters in negotiations yesterday, when you count the health insurance, stipend for EMT, their base salary, it's close to $100,000 just for a regular firefighter, not even a captain or lieutenant. So you just got to kind of plan for that. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes I've half-funded positions or faded them in October, because next year the burden to absorb is, it's only a quarter instead of.
Yep. I've noticed that over the years.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Thanks.
So I too did a comparison of the 26 comparable communities that Walpole asks us to compare with. And just a couple of things I'll throw out. Our budget for the fire service here in Walpole is 22nd out of the 26 comparable communities. The population, we're 12th out of the 26. In area, we're 7th out of the 26. So,
Lisa, Ally, Kathleen, then Susan, and then Sean.
Okay. No, I'm super quick. I was going to ask you about the recommendation of 2.43 firefighters per 1,000. You said in the Northeast, that's the recommendation. What was the body you said that had that recommendation?
it was the NFPA.
Okay. National Fire Prevention Association.
And to clarify, I don't know that it's so much a recommendation, because there are other variables, as Mark had mentioned earlier, when Police Chief Carmichael was up here, but of their research in the Northeast, that's what, communities over 25,000, that's what their staffing in their research came back at, so.
And
So that is the number that,
if I can follow on then, on that group of 26 communities that you're doing comparisons with, are some of them hitting that recommendation of 2.5 firefighters per 1,000, would you say?
without, some of them are, most of them are not.
Okay. I mean, would you say that it's a wish target or a real target?
No, it's a real target. In order for us to staff our equipment and have it so that we operate with it.
So 62 firefighters at our current population?
16 per
Yeah.
shift. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ally?
Just was looking for an update. I know last year there was kind of the reposition for the inspections and things for full-time fire. And then, do we have anyone in the academies and things like that? And the third part is, if we can go after this grant, could we see a good jump, say, next year, if we were awarded that, from just adding 2 to, say, adding 4 in the fire department?
So your first question was for the day shift position?
Didn't we last year, this cycle, that was approval to kind of focus more on all of these inspections that are taking place?
Yes,
and
and
things
one of
like
the,
that?
we hit I funded it, I think, for a half or 3/4 of the year.
October.
Yeah, from October. We wanted to change around some of the language. We hit a bit of a speed bump, not anything negative on one side or the other. We just wanted to clarify the language. So we haven't filled that. It's going to likely be filled with one of the current lieutenants, right?
No, one of the guys will be
One of the
moving.
current firefighters. So we're still working on it. Like, we had a great negotiation session with them yesterday, so I think it's going to happen very soon. But, and what was the other questions? I'm sorry.
Do we have anyone in line?
I have
You said there's 4 people out.
Yes.
We're looking to
I have a
add more.
firefighter going to the academy on March 15th. And then I have, we did interviews last week for future candidates.
I just know that that's been an issue and kind of delayed.
It takes even longer than the police academy.
It is, so some of the candidates that we had last week, they're very good candidates on the medic side, but they didn't have a lot on the fire side. We do have one on the fire side that may work out. We're in the process of doing some background right now.
And then the third final one was if we are able to get into this grant, I know we spoke of this last year, would that be a way for, talking to get to 64 overnight? What could that potentially, how could we really grow the department through that grant?
What's the cap on that? Is there a cap?
There is no cap.
So it just.
See?
Jim, you okay?
I mean, it's unfortunate it dropped from 100% down to 75%,
No, so
but,
I'll speak to that. So that is why I want the workshop with the Board of Selectmen, so that I get guidance from them on how many folks they want me to pursue with the grant.
knowing that it's like a 12 to 18 month cycle to get?
No, so that grant is a 3-year grant. It's 75, 75, 35, I believe, or 25. And it's everything except for overtime at the bottom step for the 3 years. So there is a little incremental because we have 6 steps on the firefighters, so there is a little incremental on each hire as well. But I need guidance from them as to how many folks they want me to. The only specifics on the grant is that we're trying to get to the standard of 1710, which is an NFPA standard, which is to get the proper number of personnel on scene for our emergencies, and that's 17, so within an 8-minute period. So
for me, looking at it as a budget, I think it's a little bit of a gamble on the downside, so I don't want to go too far out on a limb. I look at it, I'm like, okay, what if we did 4? We did four firefighters as part of, the first year of it. And I would ramp up, I think I'd park the money in their overtime, so it's not a shocker come the 3rd year when it's 25, and then the 4th year when we fully have to fund it, and just really essentially, hopefully we'd close that money out to free cash those first 3 years, and then it will be parked in that budget. I kind of ramp it up that way.
So you mentioned that Norwood had 64. Have other local towns really utilized that grant to bump their staff up?
The one that I know that just did it was Rentham.
And how many did they go for?
6.
6.
Is that you get it once and then you have to wait till that cycle completes before you can apply again? Or could you do 2 on your first year, and then when you get to the 3rd year, try to get 2 more guys into the program?
I'm looking at the deputy because he went to the training for it.
So if you're awarded it, you have 1 year to get those individuals
Right.
hired and on the floor. So I imagine you could, actually, I'm not sure if you could. I can get you that, but I'm not 100% sure if you could, while you're in that 3-year cycle, if you could
Apply for
try
2
bumping
more
in
on the 3rd year, as those
for-
guys go to 25%, try to get 2 more on the list. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that plays into how aggressive you go after the first grant.
I think I was next. Through you, I'm trying to get my brain around the 64. So I'm wondering, as a taxpayer, what would I see if we were fully staffed at 64? What would I see differently? And thank heavens I haven't needed you personally. What would it look like that's different than now?
Operationally, we would be more efficient. Not that we're not, because we have a very good department.
Yeah, nobody's doubting that
But-
you're obviously.
Obviously, we would be able to get more personnel on scene, especially for larger scale incidents, and have a better chance of mitigating that incident.
So now this is going to sound, there's no easy way to say this.
Right.
So day to day, no emergency occurs, we got a bunch of guys and gals sitting around? How
No,
does that
so
work?
we do training every day, but that's another area that we do it with our our staff that happens to be there. We have a training officer who schedules it for them, but he isn't always there for each class. It's self-directed by my officers on each group that self-direct the training. We also have people that come in and do our training for us, so we're always doing something during the day.
So more staff would be
It would allow us to.
more efficient
so
response. better trained.
And your question is a great question, because the new station was built out for staffing of 11. So that maxes out this station. The other station in East Walpole, which was brought up during the discussion for the new station, because I had asked for housing for 16 out of the new station, and we cut that back with the anticipation that we could open up the satellite station if we had ever got to that point. So what it does is it gives you quicker fire protection if we open that station down there, we can have an engine quicker to the Route 1 corridor, which is where most of our commercial stuff is. Not all, but a lot of it, a lot of the bigger stuff. And then downtown, it would allow us to staff the tower as well. And then the other station, the other thing that could happen down there, because it's a two-bay station, is we have the capacity to house 5 folks there. So you could actually put the other ambulance down there and run one down there and one uptown, again, to increase your response time.
That actually would get you to 1A faster too, if you were over that way perhaps.
We were open, in '06 we were open, and then we had the layoffs in '09. That station was open back then. Since we brought them back up here, because it was a financial decision that it just wasn't working for man-to-man. It was too costly, filling the overtime. It's a little difficult going from that station over, because you have to travel on Mylod Street, which isn't the greatest street, or Plimpton Street. So the only other street you have is to come back into the center of town and then cut over. So we did use the other routes a lot, and Deputy Barry was actually stationed out of Station 2 when that was happening. He can attest to the issues of responding from there better than I can.
Yeah, I was thinking short term you could get to Mylod, which would get you to that end of 1A that we were worried about.
And it still is quicker than what we have. However, the detour route that they have for the project, and I don't know how that's all going to shake out, it is going down and using Mylod Street. So for everyone else in town to avoid that construction project to get around. So the initial one, when they showed us that,
It's already taken.
when they showed us that detour route, that's how the detour route went. So I do not know if that's been changed, but the initial discussions, that's where it was.
27 Wash, Mylod.
Yeah,
That's the night one will be that.
yeah. So,
Plus everybody with a cell phone using the Waze. Gonna jump off as soon as traffic gets backed up, they jump off on the side roads and just jam those up. And those, there's no place to pass any traffic on those roads. There's been some harrowing spots when you're trying to avoid oncoming traffic or trying to pass another vehicle on those roads. It's not an ideal situation to cut across town with.
You next.
Yeah, I just wanted to support this, and I think it's a long time coming, and I think it's still way shy of what we need. And I think one of the things good government should do is be proactive. So with all of these people coming into town with all this new development, we can't wait for them to come and then say, oh, wait, we're going to need more people. I mean, we need more people today with what we have, and then with this influx, we got to get our ducks in a row and get lined up. The other thing I want to say about police and particularly fire, though, is that, we haven't had major tragedies, but you can see that how it could happen. It's just a situation that, to me, not to be punny, but playing with fire, to be understaffed in the way that we have managed, and it's a credit to your leadership and your staff. But I myself personally worry about it. I think that we don't have the people power that we need, and I think we've got to really. We've done some work with police, and I think we need to do some work tonight for fire and keep it going, because, we're facing huge growth, and with that will come huge demands, and these are life and death situations that we're talking about. So I'm strongly in favor of this, and I would like to see us, however we can do it, keep adding every year so that we get up to the level of staff where we have comfort for public safety. Thank you.
Just two questions. Thank you for all your detail as well. You're amazing. Could either of these positions ever be required through collective bargaining to come in ahead of when we are ready to fund them?
No, all of the collective bargaining agreements are subject to appropriation, so.
Okay. And so as we add additional firefighters, would this ever improve or decrease like the overtime lines? Would that?
Not in its entirety, no.
You would do something similar to the police where you would have that extra man on shift, so if somebody doesn't show, you've now got two-person wiggle room, then
Increasing the
one-person
minimum.
wiggle room?
We actually, yes, exactly, so.
Increase the minimum, so you wouldn't have that.
Right.
Part of the idea behind it.
'Cause we're actually doing that now, so we're putting on more personnel to get to the end goal, but if I have 10 on each group, which is fantastic, and thank you, but my minimum's still 8. So if I have 2 folks out that day, my minimum's still 8. I've gained on this end, trying to get to the end goal of, which would be 12 or 13. 12 would give me 1, 13 would give me 2 folks that could be out on any given day. I don't know if that makes sense, but that basically floats that, so that we can cover the vacation and or sick and or injury, so.
Because that's got a related question.
The safe grant?
Safer.
Safer
Mhm.
grant. When does it have, is there a deadline or is there a
Yes,
rolling?
the application period for it is in March. It has not been announced yet, but it's
Okay.
typically, the last 3 or 4 years been in March. We have been told that it will be coming out again, just do not have a definitive date.
And how long before you hear?
When it's open, it's only open for about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. And then awards last year were given out in June.
So the money is accessible at that time, hypothetically?
They're awarded.
If it's awarded, yes, I believe so.
What do you think? July, sometime after July, I would guess.
Yeah, which would be your next fiscal
Yeah.
year.
Right, so what happens is the federal government awards the grant to us, and then there's paperwork that we have to fill out and get back and have it signed by, so there could be a little bit of a lag. The academy for getting the personnel from, so right now, we have to wait for our personnel. They get put in a pecking order when we hire them. They go at the end of the list, and that list is a couple of hundred right now, but they're filling the August class. If you are awarded the SAFER grant, those people, because of the time restrictions that are on the federal grant, they go to the front of the list.
So you don't lose your grant?
No, they jump over that next class, they fill with the SAFER folks first.
That's fantastic.
And ours get pushed back a little bit, so.
Okay.
It's a fluid movement. Now, the academy has made great strides. They just opened up a 3rd academy in Bridgewater. So their first class is going through there now, so hopefully that'll take off some of the burden and do some quicker turnaround, because we were waiting upwards of 8 to 9 months to get them in, and then it was 10 weeks there. So once our folks come out of there at the end of the 10 weeks, they go right onto the shift, so.
Thank you.
Denny, was it a grant question or something else?
No, you answered it without me asking, so thank you.
Andrew?
I just want to circle back to this numerical issue, because I think other people have raised it, and I think we're all, I don't want to speak for other people. I'm very convinced that at 38 firefighters, you're not even at 10 right now, adding 2 to get to 10, that's a no-brainer. Getting to 11 to be fully staffed just here on a perfect day, no-brainer. Getting to 12 per shift or even 13 per shift to have the wiggle room to be fully staffed here, no-brainer. You're getting up to 50-something firefighters. That's great. The thing that I'm struggling with is the 64, the 16 number. I get that it's aggressive, the thing that is rubbing me is that when we communicate to the public at town meeting about where we're going, what's the end goal, because every town meeting we say, hey, we're going to add in this year's fiscal budget 2 new firefighters. Okay, great, but eventually they're going to want to know what's the end goal. In the 16 per, the 64 end goal, or if you do the 2.43 population ratio according to this national organization, that's 68. And I'm using the 28,000 population number. For the police department, and I'm not trying to put the police against the fire by any means, but one of the reasons that it's digestible is using the 28,000 number and the 2 per 1,000, that's 56 police officers. That's a 27% increase from current staffing to where we want to get. 27%, you can sell that. You can say to the public, hey, we have growth, we have increases. To get to the 68 number, that's an 80% increase in firefighters. And that's just hard. So I want to support you growing your staff by a dozen or more firefighters. It's just hard to sell it to the public when you say, hey, the end goal here is an 80% increase in firefighters. That's just going to just not sit well with a lot of folks. So I just want to raise it now because I want to be on your side and I want to fight for the resources, but it's a big number.
No, understandable.
I think that comes back down to gathering more detailed statistics, especially on your ambulance service, where we've got potentially an aging community.
Potentially.
Not potentially.
We've got it.
Well, I mean,
Potentially
as
it's here.
a percentage of the population, as a percentage of the population.
The demographics.
Yeah, if you turn around and say, 50% of our ambulance calls are to people who are 60 and older, and our 60 and older population is going up 20%, I've got to put manpower on to make 20% more calls to, by basically saying, I need to put an ambulance in East Walpole and add the second one as a backup downtown because I have to go south and west from there. So you can, by getting more statistics and saying, where's the demographic
The
groups?
statistics on the
Yeah.
seniors, I think, is going to, especially everything is age qualified that's gone in down here. I think that would be very important, a
Yeah.
selling factor.
Especially where ambulance service is something that you can definitely say, if my wife is having a heart attack or my kid is choking, I want somebody here in 2 minutes, because at 5 minutes without oxygen, it's too late. So that you can sell. Fire calls, like, I don't hear the engine, running down the street, because sometimes they run without the siren, sometimes they do, but it's like, yeah, the last time there was a fire in my neighborhood, it was like, they showed up and they put out the guy's lawn fire because, a spark got out of his grill. But the thing is, I've seen a ladder truck come down the street to do ambulance service because that's what was available. So, yeah.
I guess my kind of thought is, again, I'm thinking these additional positions now, they certainly make sense to me. With this increase in number, whatever it may be, I think it's more or less then now tied into like a strategic plan. Here's where Walpole's going in the next 10 years. Here's what the police needs to look like. Here's what the fire, it's selling it at the town meetings. Because I'm struggling in my head too. 30, 60, and I always, and I'll just be upfront about it, like this, and the national firefighters or the thing you're quoting, like, has there ever been a time when they've said, no, you homeowners, you've invested in the smoke alarms, you've bought the fire retardant materials, we're gonna recommend you have less fires. We're gonna recommend the fire trucks are smaller. We're gonna recommend, it just never happens. It's always, so that's why I think to do that, it's a strategic plan where it says, as a whole town, requirements, amongst all the town services, and then start giving people here comes the shock, because Walpole's going from a small bedroom community to
It's a mini city.
And I mean,
Quite an
you
active
get an apartment fire down here and an incident at the mall or at Siemens, well, you need more than one truck at each thing, but you've
Yeah.
only got staff to send one truck here, and when the ambulance guys get back, they'll take the truck over there. It's like,
Yeah, no,
you need more manpower.
Some more? I don't know.
Go ahead.
Elaine. Through you, I think it's a mistake to be talking about 64 tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, in fairness, somebody asked the chief, what's
Yeah.
what is he looking at as an ideal? But what we're looking at is
Yeah.
I
two.
think Denny asked it, it's
now.
all his fault.
So I think to be talking about, we have to sell this to town meeting and explain, is just
Yeah.
beside the point. We're not there, and I think it's gonna take a long, long time,
Right, but
even
there are people
adding.
who ask about the growth plan because we added one
Well,
last year, we're adding two this year, and they're gonna say.
I think the
I-
short,
yeah.
the short answer is,
Yeah.
what do other communities have, and how do we stack up? And then if people say, well, I'm happy to be number, 26 out of 26, that's their opinion, but I think our role is to look at the requests each year and judge for ourselves whether we think that it's reasonable. Now, next year, there might be competing demands, or there may be other budgetary issues, but I think it's fair to say that, for the next couple of years, to the extent that we're able to add a couple every year, we should try to do it. And I think, again, we should be proactive. What's okay today, or what we're getting by on today, in 2 or 3 years, we're talking about traffic and a huge increase in population. That's not the time to say, oh, wow, we're really, behind the 8 ball. Because again, we're talking life or death. So I think we shouldn't get too far into the weeds on the numbers.
And you're being proactive.
So I agree very much with you on that. My ultimate is 16, but I'm never going to see that as long as I'm here. I understand that. The short term is getting the other engine up, a second engine, so that we have a second engine available to respond.
And
That
that's-
is my short-term goal, and that is my priority.
And that's
So
12 a shift, right?
that would be, 12, we need 11 staffed on
Yeah.
11 minimum. So whether it be 12 or 13,
Yeah.
it all depends how much you want
That
to
gets
have
you
to
to
cover the guys that are
48+
working.
command
you know.
staff, so you're pushing 50. I think that's probably a better number and a goal to aim for as you're talking.
That was my point in raising it.
I understand. And I didn't mean for it
And
to
then when
go
you get
astray
there,
in the
then you go
beginning,
up.
but
Sure.
the 16 was thrown out there, so.
I'm sorry to belabor this. In your budget message, Jim, you said that, so this current budget that we're gonna vote on, and I'd love to approve it tonight, is just adding the 2 firefighters. But you say, I'm optimistic as the budget process
And
progresses.
that's why I asked till we wait on voting on this one, so.
Okay.
Again, looping back to the insurance budget and the tri-county, they haven't given me the final insurance numbers, but I want to get the schools to where they want to be.
Sure.
And the fire to at least 10 across the board. So I'm one short of that right now.
Got it.
And, I think we'll be able to get there with that, yeah.
I hope so too.
Right. No other questions for the chief? Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Let's see, shall we vote the other public safety budgets and just leave fire open?
We already did police, right?
Did police already, right.
So that's,
Starting with inspectional services, we have to vote each of those individually.
Okay.
that's where the.
You want me to read the amounts?
Yeah, go right ahead. If you got it.
All right. Inspectional services budget for $486,945.
So moved.
So moved by Denny, seconded by Susan. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained? 12-0.
13,
Weights and measures, $5,000
So moved.
by Denny,
Second.
seconded by Susan. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? 12-0-0. Emergency management, $34,098.
So moved.
By Denny,
I'll second it.
seconded by Susan. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained? 12-0-0. Animal control, $68,657.
So moved.
Second.
Denny, seconded by Susan. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, 12-0-0. So for our next meeting, which is Monday, is the education budget. They were nice enough to get copies to Town Hall. We all have a package to go
This
through.
is the first time
Yes.
in all the years we've been on the board, we've had it at our meeting.
Yes, a full meeting ahead of the meeting, yes.
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 So just to comment on the education budget, I talked to the superintendent today. So her plan is to kind of come in and give you guys a broad overview. The school business manager, it seems like a lot of people have the flu around here.
Okay.
He caught the flu. He's been working from home, but I know that she plans on coming in at least one other time, maybe two times on top of Monday night. So she's going to basically talk to you about, here's where the Jim's recommended budget gets us, here's what would need to be cut to get to that point. Here's where we're at with 4%, what that means. Here's where we're at with I believe it's 4.8%, what the school committee recommended, to kind of give you guys some breakdown as to what would be eliminated, what would be added. If you're comfortable with that.
The other thing I was looking at is that with the booklet, the last meeting for the booklet is April 6th. We don't have the budget being resolved by then, and we only have Personnel Board, Walpole Media, and the sewer and water articles possibly being voted by that point. Does anybody have objections to trying to squeeze in an additional meeting or two in March to possibly address some of the articles so that the booklet doesn't go to press saying, recommended a town meeting for 15 articles? I don't know what people's schedules are for March, but if there's a Monday or a Thursday that everybody can agree to, maybe we can work with some of those petitioners and so forth and get something in a little sooner. You want to think about it, and we'll get back to it on Monday?
Yeah, I can just tell you that the union contracts, so far I've met with 3 out of the 6 unions. I gave them the deadline. I think I told them that their negotiations have to be done and ratified to present to selectmen. I think it was April 14th. You guys are April 16th, and then I have to send it out to town meeting on April 17th. So maybe a couple of them are going pretty well. Maybe the third one might be going well too. So we're meeting with AFSCME on Monday, so that'll get the last 3 down. So maybe we might have some progress in March.
Well, the other thing too is I was possibly thinking about the zoning articles, at least to get briefed.
Yep.
So that when the zoning board, or when the planning board does their public hearings, we already have a background, and we can move quickly on those, even though they're all scheduled to be after. I don't know if we'd be comfortable voting any of those before they meet, unless maybe we can get the planning board to come in and give us their guidance as to what they're thinking. I'm just trying to get more things into the book so it doesn't
I
look like we
did
didn't do it.
invite the planning, the housing group, and the zoning board to the selectmen's work session in this room next week. So.
Okay. All right, so there's a couple of them.
Yeah.
All right.
But I would like to just echo that. I think there's been a tremendous amount of work on this. I know it's a lot of detail to digest, and the Housing Partnership Committee, in conjunction with Ashley and other consultants, are working to condense this in a very digestible way. And we're trying to communicate this as clearly as possible to town meeting members, but of course to this board and to the planning board. So I just want to echo what Mark suggested. Even though we're technically scheduled to vote on those 2 articles that are 12 pages of text on April 9th, I think it would behoove us to, have Ashley come in and talk about it, ahead of time. So
She had a great presentation this past week for the selectmen, and she kept it to like 20 minutes.
She got it down.
It was really concise. So.
Good.
Yeah. And do we know if the planning board is planning on holding their meeting on April 2nd?
I actually confirmed with the chairman. He said, you get it to me by, I think, 28th or 30th, I'll have it on the 2nd, because I synced up their schedule with your schedule.
Okay, all righty. So basically, they would be doing 6 articles that night for their public hearings on the 2nd?
6 articles. Well, there's only 2 zoning articles.
Well, they've got the inclusionary zoning, the inclusionary zoning, the stretch code.
That's a bylaw. That's not a bylaw.
It's strictly bylaw? Okay. What about the citizens petitions for overlay?
So those are the only 2, the inclusionary zoning and the citizens petition for South Walpole.
Okay, all right.
The stretch code, when we first came on the board,
Yeah.
when Michael was the administrator, we were talking about, is this the same?
It's the same, but it's changed a lot. When this first came up about a year or two ago, I talked to the building commissioner, and then I talked to Mike when he started as the building commissioner. I said, talk to me about the stretch code. I know it's evolved since it first came out. Right now, the building code that he's enforcing is essentially the stretch code. They've changed the code that much, so it's not going to be, I know the argument years ago was, this is going to drive up the cost of housing to build them, which is going to drive up the cost to sell them to people,
We
and
were the only town that was going to
Yeah,
be doing
so-
it, and
that's much more of a moot point at this,
Yeah.
this many years later, so.
Okay, so possibly we could move the stretch code and we can move the capital budget items into March, have our
there aren't any
discussions.
capital budget.
No, the ones that are talking about capital projects and thresholds and restrictions on it, numbers 24 and 25. If we can get those in earlier, at least that would be something in the book. Residents would be saying, what has Finance Committee been doing? We've only got three votes here, and everything else is gonna show up, in the town meeting members' hands the week before town meeting, but the town's gonna have to try to figure out, what can I look online and find out about as things change? So, I was just trying to get more into the public's hands so that they would be informed, and if they wanna come to the public hearing, they're not saying, what'd you finally decide about this? What'd you finally decide about that?
And again, the two other articles besides the stretch code, that's citizen's petition. That citizen is gonna come in and explain it to you on his own. I'll be out in the audience.
Yeah,
so.
that's fine. Yeah. No, that's quite all right.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask a question of you
There.
into the audience.
We have no other items on our agenda for tonight, so if there's no other questions, comments, or points to be raised.
To adjourn?
Motion to adjourn by Denny, seconded by Susan.
Yeah.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 12-0-0. Thank you for your help.